In the quiet suburban landscape where I lived, my home was more than just a residence. It was a secure base of operations. The room I transformed into my office was equipped with the latest technology, ensuring confidentiality and efficiency, a necessity for my work as a covert CIA operative. My colleagues and superiors operated under strict protocols, and that meant operating mainly from home during unconventional hours. While others were settling in for the night or enjoying leisurely weekends, I could be found on calls with sources across the globe or meticulously reviewing intelligence reports. This lifestyle, however, was soon to collide with the scrutiny of my homeowners association, HOA. What I viewed as pivotal duties performed in private became the subject of suspicion for my neighboring residents. Their initial curiosity turned into hostility when they noted my unusual working hours and occasional deliveries arriving at odd times. To them, the package might have seemed like evidence of an unlicensed business running from my garage, a notion that could not have been further from reality. The HOA's perception twisted into a harrowing narrative of alleged wrongdoing. Notices began appearing in my mailbox, official letters accusing me of violating local ordinances by operating a business without a permit. I initially shrugged these off as misguided attempts to enforce community rules, but their persistence grew alarming. Each notification felt like a tightening noose around my neck. They seemed determined to uncover what they believed was hidden just beneath the surface. The real turning point came when Karen, the self-appointed president of our HOA and an eager champion of neighborhood watch initiatives, took it upon herself to escalate their efforts. Armed with a camera and a notepad, she began documenting every visitor who crossed my threshold as though she were conducting an FBI investigation instead of fulfilling community obligations. Her brand of vigilance crossed from concern to obsession. She would often wait by her window to spy on me, ready to jot down any detail that could support her wild claims. Soon enough, fueled by fabricated evidence pieced together from her surveillance activities, the HOA decided to take their allegations up a notch. They reported me to county authorities in hopes of forcing an official investigation. I couldn't help but feel bewildered by their actions. Here I was, following all legal guidelines and maintaining confidentiality around my work while they enacted such overreaching measures against me. However, unbeknownst to them was the critical misstep they had made. Reporting a covert CIA operative ignited mechanisms they could never have anticipated. My classified identity triggered alarm bells that reverberated far beyond our quaint community when it reached federal oversight levels. Suddenly, their relentless scrutiny wasn't just directed at me, but had placed a spotlight on their HOA's potentially illegal practices. As I sat in my secure office wondering how this confrontation would unfold, little did they know that their prying eyes were about to lead them down a path from which there would be no return. What they thought would expose criminal activity would instead set off a chain reaction involving federal inquiries, a situation none of us could have predicted, but one that would ultimately change everything for the HOA and our community at large. The relentless scrutiny from my homeowners association began with an innocuous white envelope slipping through my mailbox, a violation notice claiming unauthorized business activities. Confusion washed over me as I read the contents, which outlined accusations of running an unpermitted business from my garage. I was at a loss. How could they misconstrue my work-from-home arrangements as anything but legitimate? I took pride in my job and followed every regulation that came with it, both personally and professionally. As the days passed, more notices piled up, each one more accusatory than the last. They cited specific allegations, often referencing late-night phone calls and sporadic package deliveries as suspicious behavior. It felt surreal to be branded a suspect in my own neighborhood, and each letter felt like another brick added to a wall of misunderstanding that was closing in around me. I found myself second-guessing my own actions. Was I being too secretive? Should I have conducted my work differently, perhaps more transparently? Thoughts raced through my mind as I tried to rationalize their unreasonable accusations. Determined to clear my name, I approached the HOA during their next meeting, hoping to illuminate the truth behind my activities. As I stepped into the room filled with wary glances and hushed whispers, I could feel their palpable suspicions swirling around me. Karen, the president leading the charge against me, sat at the front table with an almost triumphant air. She had taken on the role of investigator, convinced that she was uncovering something nefarious. "Please understand," I began, trying to maintain my composure despite the weight of their collective judgment. "I am not operating a business from home. My work is classified and conducted under strict regulations. But Karen interrupted, her eyes narrowing as if she were dissecting my every word. You see, it's not just about what you say, she retorted condescendingly. It's about what we observe, the deliveries, your hours, they simply don't add up. I left that meeting feeling defeated and helpless. Their minds were made up despite my honest explanations. Instead of alleviation, this confrontation only fueled their fire further. In the weeks that followed, I became increasingly aware of their invasive tactics. Cars parked outside my house for hours at a time, neighbors whispering behind closed doors whenever they thought I wasn't looking. The HOA's campaign against me escalated into what felt like an invasion of privacy. Signs of surveillance emerged when I discovered cameras positioned suspiciously near my property line, disguised as efforts to ensure community safety, but clearly aimed at monitoring my movements and visitors without consent. Even worse was the realization that they had initiated a dedicated plan to gather evidence against me through petty tactics. It culminated in an official report submitted to local authorities accusing me of illegal activity. The bewilderment turned into anger as I realized they had decided to escalate these baseless claims beyond mere harassment. They were attempting to paint me as a criminal in front of law enforcement. Each step they took seemed more brazen than the last, proving that they were willing to cross any line in pursuit of their unfounded suspicions. In that moment of frustration and vulnerability, little did I know this misguided pursuit would trigger unforeseen consequences for them. Consequences that would soon spiral far beyond our small neighborhood conflict and lead directly into federal territory. Their campaign against me might have appeared calculated. They just did not comprehend how much trouble they were courting by poking around in matters far beyond their understanding or jurisdiction. As the letters from the HOA piled up, their tactics turned more invasive. It wasn't enough for them to send me violation notices. They now decided to surveil my activities directly. I first noticed something was off when I spotted an unfamiliar car parked across the street, its occupants seemingly engaged in an endless conversation while glancing intermittently at my home. Their behavior raised a red flag, and I soon realized there was a systematic effort underway to track my every move. Before long, ominous black cameras appeared on lampposts along the main road and adjacent to my property line. What was initially disguised as enhanced security measures for our community took on a more sinister tone. The cameras were trained directly at my front door and side windows, diligently monitoring the goings-on at my house. Their argument was centered around ensuring neighborhood safety, but it was clear that the true intent was to gather evidence against me, evidence that only existed in their imaginations. Sometimes people dig too deep and don't realize what they're getting into, kind of like how subscribing to this channel might uncover some stories you never saw coming. Now, let's get back to how the HOA found out the hard way. Karen, leading this misguided crusade as HOA president, might have believed she was protecting our neighborhood from criminal activity, but her actions spoke otherwise. Taking matters into her own hands, she began personally following any visitors I received, her demeanor suspicious and her eyes sharp with scrutiny. I watched in disbelief as she loitered just down the block, taking notes and snapping photos with a small camera concealed in her handbag. It felt reminiscent of a scene from a spy movie. Little did they know they were up against someone who operated in such clandestine spaces far beyond their understanding. The ridiculousness of the situation weighed heavily on me. Karen's efforts struck me as comical yet deeply intrusive. What kind of neighbor followed another about like that? I could feel anger boiling beneath my surface each time I caught her peering over fence posts or hiding behind trees trying to catch a glimpse of those who dared visit me. Each daily visitor, a friend dropping off groceries or a colleague bringing documents, was met with her rapt attention, and I found myself having to explain their presence through defensive rhetoric rather than engaging freely with them. Moreover, it wasn't enough for Karen and her cohorts to watch. They began crafting narratives to justify their unwarranted actions. Any parcel left at my doorstep became fodder for gossip. Each delivery spun into a story about hidden dealings or unlawful businesses operating right under their noses. They seemed unable or unwilling to recognize that phones ringing late into the night signaled nothing more than international communications crucial for my work, and not childish games played from within the confines of my home. More outrageously, they assembled what they believed was sufficient evidence to support their allegations. Photographs of foot traffic at odd hours, timestamps of packages arriving late, snippets of conversations they had eavesdropped on when I mistakenly left the garage door open while bringing in materials. Each claim served to fortify their belief that I was somehow living outside the bounds of legality. I grew increasingly frustrated and desperate. How could they possibly misconstrue everything about my life so badly? Their ill intentions were blinding them from what should have been clear. I was not an imposter, but a citizen performing essential duties often invisible to those around me. Yet even amid this storm of paranoia crafted by the HOA, an ember of curiosity ignited within me. How far could their surveillance escalate? Would they attempt to tar me further with accusations that bordered on absurdity? As these thoughts looped in my mind, one thing became clear. Their clumsy analysis of my life would soon spiral out of control and beckon far worse consequences than mere misunderstandings among neighbors. Fueled by their growing paranoia and an insatiable need to validate their suspicions, the HOA took the drastic step of reporting me to local authorities. It was a bold move, demonstrating their determination to drive me out of the community they believed I was corrupting. I learned of their decision through a neighbor who was sympathetic to my plight. He had overheard Karen at a meeting bragging about how she had finally taken action against me. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I was stunned and furious at their audacity. They claimed in their report that I was running an unlicensed business from my garage and alleged that my late-night calls were indicative of some shady dealings. I couldn't believe that they had concocted such elaborate narratives based on mere speculation and misunderstandings. What they saw as evidence, a box of documents I had received or a few late-night phone calls, were simply parts of my clandestine operations as a CIA operative. My heart raced as I realized how dire the situation had become. This wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. It had escalated beyond my control and could lead to serious consequences. In the days that followed, I prepared for the inevitable encounter with law enforcement. While my work required discretion, I knew I had to be transparent about my identity if questioned. As if sensing turmoil brewing around me, Karen intensified her surveillance efforts, convinced that her report would yield results. It felt as if she were waiting for justification for her invasive behavior, hoping for validation from outside authorities that would somehow make her feel justified in her crusade against me. When the investigators finally arrived, it felt surreal. Two uniformed officers knocked on my front door while Karen lurked nearby, her expression triumphant as if she were witnessing the climax of some drama she thought she'd orchestrated. As they introduced themselves and explained why they were there, I felt a mix of indignation and despair wash over me. They began asking questions about my work hours and the visitors who came and went from my home. I did my best to remain composed while explaining that I worked from home, citing confidentiality agreements that precluded me from divulging details about my job for national security reasons. The officers appeared skeptical but courteous. It was clear they weren't here to judge, but rather to investigate claims made by concerned neighbors. Yet with every word I spoke, Karen's eyes sparkled with delight at what she perceived as vindication. I could sense the officers questioning whether I truly operated within legal boundaries. After all, how often did someone face such scrutiny without cause? Still, as they probed further into the allegations raised by Karen and her confederates, it became increasingly evident how baseless those claims were. Meanwhile, a sense of dread settled in. The real danger was lurking just below the surface of these petty complaints. That someone might take them seriously enough to dig deeper into my life than necessary. Little did Karen know that her zealous pursuit of retribution could set into motion events far beyond what even she could anticipate. As investigations unfolded, whispers began circulating within our community regarding the legitimacy of not just my activities, but also those behind the accusations themselves. My unassuming neighbors now caught amidst a web of their own making. What started as an act of malice towards one individual risked unraveling something much larger than any of us could have imagined in our small suburban enclave, especially as hidden truths waited in the shadows to emerge when pushed too far. As the investigation into my alleged activities progressed, I remained on high alert, acutely aware that every moment could lead to more complications. I tried to reassure myself that the truth would eventually surface, but I never anticipated the degree to which the HOA's misguided actions would backfire. Their complaint, rooted in paranoia and misunderstanding, triggered a wave of federal attention due to my classified identity as a CIA operative. The moment the county authorities filed their report, it set off alarm bells within my agency. My work was sensitive and shrouded in secrecy, a reality that made the situation exponentially more complicated. As news traveled through the appropriate channels, my agency sprang into action. It wasn't long before they reached out to me, expressing concern about potential breaches of security protocols stemming from the HOA's meddling. A team of agents was dispatched to investigate not only my situation, but also the validity of the HOA's claims. They soon realized how deep the rabbit hole went. What appeared to be harmless inquiries by neighbors had morphed into an overt violation of privacy and possibly illegal surveillance practices. The agents were particularly interested in uncovering how the HOA had acquired information about my activities and who was responsible for instigating this chain reaction of baseless allegations. As my agency delved deeper, they served subpoenas on the HOA to obtain records related to their surveillance efforts and internal communications. The findings were shocking. Not only had they overstepped their bounds in gathering evidence against me, but they had engaged in practices that violated local data privacy laws and ethical standards. This situation quickly transitioned from a personal affront to a matter of national security, unraveling the seemingly quaint suburban facade of our community. The ramifications cascaded like dominoes. The agents uncovered an unsettling pattern of negligence on the part of the HOA board, revealing that several members had been skimming funds from community budgets under the guise of safety measures and maintenance fees. Furthermore, Corinne's obsessive efforts to monitor my activities led her down a path of invasive misconduct, thereby opening her up to potential legal repercussions. As details emerged throughout the investigation, the atmosphere within our community changed dramatically. Neighbors once divided by suspicion began to unite against an authority they had once trusted blindly. Whispers circulated about Corinne's misdeeds and how her relentless pursuit of a criminal among them had inadvertently brought federal scrutiny down upon all their heads. The culmination of these investigations came when local law enforcement officers arrived in tandem with federal agents to confront the HOA board. Board members found themselves at a loss for defense as they were presented with hard evidence of their wrongdoing. The sense of vindication I felt was bittersweet. While I was finally being cleared of false accusations, I couldn't help but feel frustration at how far this had spiraled out of control due to sheer paranoia. In a remarkable twist of fate, not only did my name clear, but I also became an unexpected catalyst for change within our community. The ongoing federal review resulted in significant reforms. The HOA was set for legal dismantling due to their unethical practices and failure to adhere to community standards. New leadership would be instituted, one committed to safeguarding not only individual rights, but also ensuring no one else would face such targeted assaults on their reputation again. Little did Corinne and her supporters know that their desperate attempts to drive me away would ultimately lead to their own downfall, a poetic justice that turned a harrowing ordeal into an opportunity for renewal within our neighborhood. As uncertainty turned toward optimism, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I had survived this storm intact and emerged with a story that would forever reshape our community. As the investigation gained momentum, the involvement of my agency became pivotal. The moment the HOA's accusations reached federal ears, alarms rang out within the CIA. My superiors understood the implications of private citizens engaging in unauthorized surveillance, especially when those citizens were targeting someone with a classified identity. It was clear that this situation warranted immediate attention, not just for my sake, but for national security as well. A specialized team was assembled to delve into the HOA's activities, tasked with uncovering any breaches of security and privacy. The agents were meticulous, aware that their inquiry could unearth more than just individual violations. They began by serving subpoenas on the HOA, demanding access to all records pertaining to their surveillance operations, internal communications, and any documentation that could shed light on their methods of gathering information about me. What they discovered was shocking. The documents revealed not only a pattern of negligence, but also an alarming disregard for privacy laws. The HOA had been operating outside their legal bounds, installing cameras without consent from homeowners and maintaining detailed logs of visitors to my property based on mere speculation and misinformation. These practices represented blatant violations not just of community guidelines, but also of state and federal laws designed to protect individual rights. The agents unearthed communications that indicated a concerted effort among board members to collect information on me, including messages where they discussed their strategies for intimidation and surveillance. They had swiftly crossed the line from concerned neighbors to unwitting conspirators in a scheme that endangered not only my privacy, but also their own positions within the community. Moreover, as investigators worked through the evidence, they uncovered financial discrepancies that painted a broader picture of corruption within the HOA. Through careful auditing of their budget reports, it became evident that several members had exploited funds meant for community maintenance and security enhancements. Instead, these funds were funneled into personal accounts under the guise of operational costs linked to their intrusive surveillance activities. With this mounting evidence in hand, federal agents prepared to confront the HOA board. They coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure that the ultimate delivery of justice would leave no stone unturned. As news spread throughout our community about ongoing investigations into the HOA practices, tensions rose. Neighbors who once stood firmly behind Karen began to waver as whispers of unethical behavior circulated. The moment finally arrived when law enforcement showed up at one of the regular HOA meetings, ready to present their findings and hold members accountable for their actions. The air was thick with tension as board members sat frozen in shock when confronted with proof of their malfeasance. I observed from a distance, a mix of relief and vindication swelling within me. This was more than just personal justification. This marked a turning point for our entire neighborhood. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Board members began resigning or were placed on administrative leave as evidence continued to pile up against them. With each new revelation shared publicly, a sense of unity emerged among residents who had previously felt divided by suspicion and fear. As the investigation concluded, it was clear that my agency's involvement had not only exonerated me, but had initiated sweeping reforms in our community governance. The illegal activities carried out by the HOA translated into significant repercussions. Members found themselves not only facing public outrage, but also potential criminal charges. In retrospect, what began as an assault on my character unraveled into an awakening for our community, a testament to the importance of vigilance against unchecked power and paranoia. I realized that through this tumultuous journey, we were all poised for renewal. We could emerge stronger by fostering trust and ensuring transparency going forward. The transformation sparked hope where despair once reigned, forever changing how we viewed our roles as citizens in this small yet vibrant neighborhood. As the investigation into the HOA's activities unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the organization had been operating under a veil of deception and misconduct. The initial focus was on their unfounded accusations against me, but as federal agents delved deeper, a myriad of serious issues came to light, painting a grim picture of their operations. First and foremost were the glaring data privacy violations. The agents uncovered documentation showing that the HOA had installed cameras not only around my property, but throughout various common areas without properly notifying residents or obtaining consent. This blatant disregard for privacy rights revealed how far they had strayed from their original purpose as community protectors. Instead of fostering safety, they had unwittingly engaged in surveillance that violated both ethical norms and legal standards. Moreover, the illegal surveillance practices extended beyond mere monitoring. Agents discovered records indicating that board members were actively discussing strategies to intimidate and harass residents they deemed suspicious. Emails emerged revealing conversations where Karen and others plotted ways to gather evidence against me through deceitful means, creating a narrative that painted me as a criminal when all I was doing was working under classified conditions. Their determination to vilify me highlighted an alarming willingness to cross moral lines in pursuit of their agenda. The financial discrepancies revealed during this investigation added another layer of scandal. As auditors scrutinized budget reports, it quickly became evident that several HOA members had been siphoning funds meant for community projects into personal accounts disguised as operational costs. This misuse of resources not only constituted theft, but also demonstrated a complete lack of accountability within the organization. Funds that should have gone toward maintaining our neighborhood and ensuring residents' well-being were instead funneled into private pockets, enriching those at the top while neglecting the community's needs. As these revelations surfaced, it became clear that the HOA's internal governance was riddled with corruption and malpractice. Not only did this betray the trust of residents who believed in their leadership, but it also exposed them to potential criminal charges that could carry significant penalties. With mounting evidence in hand, federal agents prepared to confront the HOA board during one of their regular meetings. It was time for accountability. They would no longer be able to hide behind fabricated narratives or misleading information. As law enforcement arrived at the meeting, I could sense a mix of dread and anticipation among board members. A palpable tension filled the room as they realized their misdeeds were finally being brought into the light. When confronted with irrefutable evidence of their wrongdoings, documents detailing illegal surveillance practices alongside financial audits, they sat frozen in disbelief. The air thickened with shock as realization set in. Their actions would have consequences far beyond what they had imagined. Throughout this unfolding drama, my feelings shifted from anxiety about my own reputation to gratitude for the collective awakening happening within our community. Neighbors who once supported Karen began reevaluating her leadership after witnessing firsthand how misplaced trust could lead to egregious abuses of power. As repercussions began to set in and community sentiment turned against those who had wronged us, I felt a renewed sense of hope for our neighborhood's future. A future built on transparency rather than secrecy and vigilant oversight instead of blind allegiance. What started as a personal battle against unjust accusations transformed into a broader movement toward ethical governance and accountability within our community. In this tumultuous period marked by revelations and reckoning, we stood at a crossroads that would define our neighborhood for years to come. A moment when we collectively chose integrity over complacency in restoring faith in our shared home. As the dust began to settle from the chaotic revelations surrounding the HOA, the fallout for board members became increasingly severe. The scrutiny that had once been directed at me now turned into a spotlight glaring down on them, igniting apprehension and anxiety among those who had perpetuated the corruption. The investigation had unraveled not only their unethical practices, but also personal secrets that would lead to severe consequences for those involved. Among them was Mark, one of the quieter board members who had often stayed in the background during meetings. Yet behind this facade of calmness lay a sea of hidden misconduct. The federal agents digging through financial records found discrepancies that were impossible to ignore. It turned out that Mark had been engaged in tax fraud. He had failed to report income derived from side businesses he operated outside his role on the board. This revelation was a chilling reminder of how deeply corruption can run within organizations that seemingly operate under the guise of community welfare. The situation transformed dramatically when my agency decided to act on these findings. Knowing that tax evasion is a serious offense, they coordinated with local authorities to ensure due process was followed. Mark's arrest became an inevitable culmination of events. It showcased a poetic justice that resonated throughout our community, highlighting how those who sought to vilify others were ultimately exposed for their own misdeeds. Rumors swirled like wildfire as news of his arrest spread throughout our neighborhood. Conversations buzzed in cafes and at grocery stores as residents reacted to the shocking revelation about someone they had trusted. Many who once supported the HOA and its president began reevaluating their loyalty. Whispers of shame and betrayal filled the air as more details emerged about Mark's actions, and his involvement in fraudulent activities meant to enrich himself at the expense of our community. In contrast to Mark's sudden downfall stood Karen, the ambitious HOA president, who had orchestrated much of the antagonism towards me. Initially confident in her position, she became increasingly agitated as agents and law enforcement continued their pursuit of truth within the organization. Fear settled into her demeanor as it dawned on her that they were not finished uncovering everything buried beneath layers of deceit. She could very well be next if investigations continued deeper. As Mark faced legal repercussions for his tax fraud charges, I began to feel the warmth of vindication wash over me. It wasn't just that I was exonerated from allegations created out of paranoia, it signified something far greater, a reckoning. Our neighborhood was uniting in a shared understanding of accountability and vigilance against unchecked power dynamics. We found strength together in confronting corruption. What once appeared as a harrowing ordeal turned into an opportunity for transformation, both for myself and for our entire community. Neighbors who were formerly divided by suspicion now rallied around a common goal, reforming our local governance and fostering transparency among one another. The awakening spurred by these revelations led us to discuss plans for improving civic engagement and holding future leaders accountable. Ultimately, while one member paid the price for betrayal, our neighborhood emerged resilient, a testament to our collective strength forged through adversity. We were writing a new narrative for our community, one built on ideals that valued integrity over complacency, ensuring that such abuses would never take hold again. In this newfound unity lay hope not just for what we could achieve together, but also for restoring trust among residents as we moved forward into a brighter future. In the aftermath of the investigation, the consequences for the HOA became inevitable. With overwhelming evidence of corrupt practices and a clear breach of ethical standards, state and federal authorities moved swiftly to dismantle the organization. The board's autocratic grip on our community was finally broken as the legal restructuring commenced, signaling the end of an era defined by fear and suspicion. Residents gathered for a community meeting, filled with anticipation about the future of our neighborhood. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of hope and apprehension. Most of us had come to terms with the betrayal we had faced. Now we were eager to shape our own destiny moving forward. As the news broke that the HOA would be disbanded, a collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Federal agents informed attendees that new leadership would be introduced, individuals who embodied integrity and transparency, dedicated to serving the community's best interests rather than wielding power for personal gain. This change meant restoring the very principles that were meant to govern our shared living space: accountability, trust, and respect for personal rights. Among those stepping up to fill leadership roles were several longtime residents who had previously been critical of the HOA's management, but had felt powerless to enact change. These individuals represented diverse perspectives and backgrounds. They were educators, small business owners, and avid community volunteers committed to creating a more inclusive environment. Their dedication shone brightly as they discussed plans for new bylaws designed to prioritize communication and cooperation among residents. A major focus was placed on safeguarding residents' rights moving forward. Clear statements would be established to protect privacy, ensuring no individual or group could surveil or intimidate others, as had been done in the past. Community forums were proposed as a means to encourage open dialogue, allowing voices from every corner of our neighborhood to be heard and addressed. The vision was set: we would build a robust support network that champions vigilance and empowers individuals to speak out against any misconduct. As discussions progressed toward practical actions, an overwhelming sense of unity emerged among neighbors. The shared resolve was palpable. No longer would divisions thrive where suspicion had once taken root. This newfound solidarity transformed into action plans designed to foster positivity rather than paranoia. The day came when the dismantling officially took place. The HOA board members were formally removed from their positions, and with them vanished their legacy of corruption. While many local residents felt anger towards them, there was also a sense of closure. To heal from this experience meant acknowledging the past while seeking a brighter future together. Those who stepped into new governing roles embraced their responsibilities with enthusiasm and care. Almost immediately, positive changes became visible. A community garden initiative took root, family-oriented events began filling the calendar, and local artwork started appearing throughout our shared spaces. Our transformation was more than administrative, it was an awakening. From the ashes of an organization that had caused division and fear rose a coalition defined by mutual respect and collaboration. We were no longer just residents, we became active stewards of our community's legacy. As I looked around at my neighbors coming together for group discussions on local projects or simply enjoying each other's company at gatherings, I felt immense pride in what we had accomplished. The remnants of that dark chapter seemed increasingly dim in light of our renewed commitment to safeguard our rights and nurture one another's well-being. In essence, we had rewritten our community's narrative, not only replacing an outdated governance model, but also solidifying bonds rooted in accountability and integrity that would last for generations to come. Together, we stood ready to face any challenges ahead with resilience and hope, lighting our path forward into an empowered future. As the dust settled from the upheaval caused by the investigation into the HOA, I stood on the precipice of a profound transformation, not just in my life, but for the entire community. The actions taken against me had inadvertently sparked a reckoning that rippled through our neighborhood, leading to a comprehensive overhaul of governance practices. My name was cleared, but more importantly, a new chapter emerged promising justice and accountability for all residents. The dismantling of the HOA marked a pivotal moment. What had once been a source of intimidation and paranoia was now an opportunity for renewal, as residents rallied together to redefine what it meant to live within our shared community. The fear that had gripped us, stemming from unjust surveillance and allegations, began to dissipate as we united under a common purpose: to ensure that such abuses would not be tolerated again. New leaders stepped forward, individuals who embodied transparency and commitment to ethical governance. Their appointments were met with enthusiasm. These were people who understood the importance of safeguarding resident rights and prioritizing privacy. With fresh perspectives and renewed energy, they set about drafting new bylaws aimed at preventing future violations. One of their first acts was to establish clear policies prohibiting unauthorized surveillance, thereby reinforcing the right of every resident to feel safe and respected in their own home. We also emphasized community engagement through open forums where residents could voice concerns and ideas without fear of reprisal. This move fostered an environment where collaboration thrived over suspicion, allowing us to address issues proactively rather than reactively. Encouraging dialogue became central to our mission. We aimed not only to listen, but also to make adjustments based on community feedback. In this newfound climate of camaraderie and vigilance, I reflected on themes that had become salient throughout this ordeal: justice, privacy rights, and resilience against unwarranted scrutiny. The journey through adversity had illuminated just how vital it is for communities to remain watchful against those who might exploit their positions for personal gain. Our collective experience instilled in us a sense of responsibility, not just towards ourselves but towards one another. Moreover, as I witnessed my neighbors supporting each other, whether it was planting flowers in our communal gardens or organizing educational workshops on local governance, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. We were no longer passive participants in our community. We became active stewards committed to nurturing an environment where everyone felt secure and valued. As we moved forward into a bright future, it was clear that this transformation came at a significant cost. The lessons learned from the past were etched into our collective consciousness. We understood firsthand how quickly power could corrupt when left unchecked. Now we were determined never to let that happen again. The journey that began with harassment and false accusations ultimately birthed resilience and unity within our neighborhood. In rewriting our narrative, we ensured that integrity reigned supreme moving forward. Together, we fortified our resolve against ignorance while solidifying bonds that would sustain us through future challenges. As I looked around at my neighbors during gatherings filled with laughter and conversation, I felt deep gratitude for what we had accomplished collectively. Not only had I cleared my name, but we had also created a legacy built on respect, openness, and accountability, one that would endure for generations to come. In essence, this experience became more than just a personal vindication. It turned into an essential awakening for our entire community, a testament to the power of resilience in overcoming adversity while safeguarding the values that truly matter in building a harmonious neighborhood.